What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more UFC DFS picks and lineup advice. This time for UFC Vegas 77. Holly Holm, Mayra Buena Silva. Best bets, lineup construction tips, DFS strategies, everything you need to crush on FanDuel and DraftKings and your sports books for this weekend's UFC event. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined like I am always by Jake the Snake, owner of MMA DFS.com. Jake, what's happening, bro?
Not a whole lot, man. A lot of talk about this slate being gross. I think it's actually pretty sick from a DFS perspective. I'm not gonna lie.
Honestly, it feels like that is typically the case as long as we get more than 12 fights. When it's the casual fan and the perspective of people on Twitter is that it's not a great card. Usually those are some of the better DFS cards. So I'm excited to talk about it with you and jump into it. For those of you who are new, welcome. What we do here, we break down the main event from a betting and DFS perspective. We analyze the newcomers on the card. There are three making their debut this week and give some background to them. We talk about fighters who have less than 4 fights in the UFC, give some context to their UFC stats, give some context to their fight logs on DraftKings. And then we close out the show with our favorite prize picks play. You see the promo code up there. A fight that you have to target in DFS. Whoever wins is likely to score extremely well, so stick around for that. And we'll close it out with our stream parlay of the week. So, Jake, main event, Holly Holm, Mayra Buena Silva. Typically, we've seen female main events get mostly lower ownership than other 5-round fights, which shouldn't be a shock if you ever played MMA DFS because most female fighters get lower ownership in general. So no difference for the 5-rounders. Jake, talk to me about Holm, Buena Silva, how you expect this to play out, and most importantly, what it means for DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a big reason a lot of the people are calling this whole slate gross in the first place. Is it's a Holly Holm main event. So I mean, we kind of know what we're getting. Typically, she's going the distance in her fights. I think it's like the last 4, 6, the last 7 have gone the distance. The one exception was the 2019 round 1 KO loss to Amanda Nunez. So yeah, I mean, Holm, man, 41 years old, former professional boxer. She's been looking to grapple more recently, coming off a 3-round grappling heavy decision win over Yana Santos. I think this is a really tough matchup to grapple, obviously. Buena Silva, armbar specialist, really dangerous person to go to the mat with. Just ask Stephanie Egger on that. You definitely got to be careful taking her down. And a lot of the scoring success that Holm has had recently has been through grappling. So this is a tricky matchup for her. I mean, we have seen her just push people up against the cage and try to land clinch strikes. That would be one, possible avenue for her to take, which, obviously that would make it a super exciting 5-round war against the fence. We'll see if she's able to actually do that, man. I think Buena Silva is pretty strong. Holly Holm obviously has that old lady strength. So maybe she'll be able to overpower. I think it's going to be exciting. Obviously, Buena Silva had been fighting at 125 pounds, 3-0 since moving up to 135, looking pretty good. Back-to-back submission wins. I really think she's doing better now. I think she switched teams. She was at Shoot Box. Now she's training down in Florida, and I think that she's shown improvements recently. She's absorbing less strikes. She actually wrestled for the first time in her last fight. She's always been a good grappler, but she's never been looking to wrestle offensively. It's always been, oh yeah, take me down, I'll armbar you, but I'm not going to look for takedowns of my own. She landed 2 takedowns in her last fight. It's not a great matchup for her to find wrestling success against a 78% takedown defensive Holly Holm, but it is potentially there, and that would be one route for Buena Silva to get it into where she would have the advantage and a potential to find a submission finish. Holm traditionally has been tough to land a bunch of strikes against. Only 2.77 significant strikes absorbed in her career. So not a great spot for Buena Silva to put up a big striking total. So overall, there's a lot of concerns on both sides when it comes to scoring. Just because, I mean, I think that it might be hard for either one of them to get many takedowns, and we might not see a ton of volume, even though Buena Silva has historically averaged a decent amount of strikes absorbed. That number's gone down since she moved up to 135. So maybe this does end up in kind of a lower scoring, 5-round decision where the winner only scores 95 points potentially. I think that's definitely an outcome in play here. And if that happens, then I think the winner could definitely get left out in high risk contests. I think because of the likelihood that it goes the distance, you still probably want to stack it in low risk. I think we have a negative 190 line that it goes the distance. So we can probably still get a decent combined score. I think, the loser will probably score decently, even if the winner doesn't score, 130 points. But it's not my favorite stack of all time in low risk, but I think I'm still doing that.
Which generally means it's a great stack if we're not that on board with it. So it's queue up 250 combined points from these two fighters. But I guess my question, Jake, is you mentioned the clinch, and again, I'm not the MMA analyst here. I'm the DFS player, but I have to wonder where Holly Holm finds success, because if she does go into the clinch, does that decision against Vieira weigh in her mind? If I'm remembering correctly, she held her up against the cage a lot, had a lot of control time, but still lost a decision. They deemed that Vieira did the most damage. Does that weigh in her mind? If that's the case, how does she score well then if that happens?
Yeah, that's a great point. She had like 10 minutes of control time along the cage, and I want to say like 188 clinch strikes in that fight. And she went on to lose the split decision that she'll still tell you she won. And I think most people watching that fight expected her to win. That was a surprising split decision win for Vieira. But you're totally right. Maybe she's like, okay, I can't do that exact game plan again. I need to stay in space, strike from range. But I think it's tricky for Holm to score well here, just because if you take away the grappling, which maybe she will grapple, but man, that's a really dangerous avenue to go down with Buena Silva with her submission skills. So there's always a chance Holm grapples and can stay safe in top position, but I don't really think it happens. I think she's going to be more likely to keep it on the feet and probably try to stay at range and just move around and pick Buena Silva apart from distance. And I don't really see her scoring well in that situation. So, I'm actually lower on Holly Holm, which it always feels gross when you're like, yeah, I'm lower on the main event favorite that the field is also lower on. Like, hot take.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, we have the data for that. Go ahead and play it how you see fit. Let's move on and let's make note of the UFC debuters. We have 3 coming to the octagon for the first time. We'll start from the first fight of the night to the last fight of the night. And in fight number 8, we have Victoria. Let me make sure I have the ordering right. I do, surprisingly. Okay. Victoria Dudikova. Jake, which just seems like deja vu from the other fighter who is a 6-0 grappler who came into the UFC a couple weeks ago and lost her debut to Luana Carolina. Correct me if I'm wrong. It looks exactly the same spot.
Yeah, the first thing I told you early in the week was, man, this girl's even worse than that other girl that just came in. 24-year-old, 6-0, 5 finishes, coming off ACL surgery following a decision win on the Contender Series. Obviously, you never know how people will bounce back, but still pretty young, so you assume she'll be okay from that. It was unclear if she hurt her knee in the fight or before the fight, because you could tell in the fight when she was having issues with her knee, but afterwards she was like, oh, I hurt my knee before the fight. So maybe like she looked a little bit worse because she had a bum knee coming in. It's hard to know, but then you go back and look at her regional tape. She was fighting a really low level of competition. Never a good sign when people are fighting outdoors. I don't know, man. She kind of seems like a fraud to me, but I will say, if you are a wrestler and you want to have an ideal matchup, Estela Nunez is that dance partner that you want, because she has no defensive wrestling and terrible cardio while being a really good striker who could knock you out in the first round. So, pretty volatile spot where Dudikova is going to come in and probably either get knocked out or find a bunch of wrestling success. Nothing in between.
Fair enough. Moving on, we have... where is that person? I'm trying to find him. It is, all right, we have, until I find the second one. Oh, I found him. Okay, sorry. Very professional operation we have going on right here. Let's see. There he is. That is not the right person. Give me 1 second, guys. There we go. Nope, that is his opponent, and we are crushing this. We have Azat Maxim from Kazakhstan. He's undefeated. Talk to me about him, Jake.
I like how you were intentionally trying to hide this guy from the public so that he'd go lower owned.
Fingers crossed, man. I'm trying to do what I
can. So yeah, man, direct replacement for Zhamagulov coming from Kazakhstan. As soon as Zizi gets cut, they're like, all right, we got a better guy for you. Check out this 28-year-old prospect, 16-0, 12 finishes. 11 of those have come in the first 2 rounds. The guy's good, man. He can strike. He's got kind of sneaky power. He generally leans mostly on his grappling. He's think first round submissions in like 2 of his last 3 wins. Looks good, honestly. I mean, I don't really have a ton of holes to poke in his game, other than that his whole career outside of one fight has been in Kazakhstan. So it's, he's been kind of facing a limited selection of opponents. So we'll see how he does in the UFC, new location, new level of opponents, but he looks good. I think the guy is legit. I think that he's going to be a guy to keep an eye on, and he's shown the ability to rack up takedowns in bunches. I counted 5 takedowns in the opening minute of a fight recently. I'm like, all right, this guy is definitely in play for DFS.
Exactly. He has fought in the Brave organization, which to me means a little bit, Jake. When we're looking at guys from different countries, we try to find those organizations that have a little more credibility. I assume you do the same.
Yeah, I think he had 2 fights with Brave. I think those were his 2 knockouts, right? If I don't have that in front of me, but yeah, no, he had that was one of his fights that was outside of Kazakhstan. I think it was in like Bahrain or something, was with Brave. But yeah, I mean, if you're fighting with legit organizations, that means a lot more than if you're fighting with like some misspelling of, like whatever, where it's like, what? Yeah, I mean, this guy was not fighting in Alaska. Let's make that clear.
All right, and finally, let's close this out with some consistency. We have a short notice replacement. Jack Della Maddalena had 2 opponents drop out, one midweek last week. They find him an opponent for a week later here in Vegas. It's Basil Hafez, the biggest underdog on the card. Does he have a shot here, Jake? What's his fighting style? What can you say about him?
I mean, he looks a lot better than Jack Della Maddalena's short notice opponent last week, Harrell, that ended up on not being medically cleared. I mean, Hafez is pretty legit. 31 years old, 8-3-1. Obviously, he's making his debut on Monday, and even at like media day, they're like, "So, what do you think of the preparation?" He's like, "Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal. Short notice. Like, what do you want me to say?"
Yeah.
The guy looked rough. The guy looked rough on the scales. He was the last guy to weigh in. He needed the shame box. He looked borderline like death in his face, but he was moving around okay. I will say that, like, his face looked sucked out, but he was moving around okay. He was hopping up on the stage. But back to his actual career, not just weigh-ins today. He's coming off the first knockout win of his career. He's generally been more of a grappler, looking for submissions. He's a first-degree BJJ black belt. So we've seen him in some submission fights where I feel like grappling fights where the grappling has sort of been a wash, and you're like, like he had a split decision against Anthony Ivy, who's also kind of a one-dimensional grappler. He had those 2 fights against Evan Cutts, and the first one was a back-and-forth grappling match where he gasped. But the second one, he was like, all right, I just switched teams from Factory X to Elevation Fight Team. Like, my striking's improved. I'm going to showcase that. And his striking looked way better. He knocked out Evan Cutts. So I think he's actually pretty well-rounded now. And I think the move from Factory X actually did him some good now at Elevation Fight Team, training with like Justin Gagey and those guys. I thought he looked good in that last fight. But I will still say that cardio has been a concern in the past. And stepping in on short notice is not ideal if you've ever had cardio concerns. So while he's a grappler who should have an advantage on the mat in this fight, I think it's going to be tougher for him to grind out a 3-round decision, just because I'm not sure he'll have the cardio to do it. So I still think he needs a finish to win the fight. And obviously that's going to be hard to do. I mean, we've seen Jack Della Maddalena get stuck in some submissions, but he's always gotten out of them, recently in his last few fights. But I would say that's the path to victory for Hafez is going to be on the mat with a submission. And I mean, it's kind of a Hail Mary option. Like, it's a long shot, but it's not impossible.
All right, fair enough. All right, let's play good fighter, bad fighter, good matchup, bad matchup. For those of you who have been watching these videos, you know how this game works. But if you are new, basically we look at these fighters that have less than 4 UFC fights under their belt. And to give some context to their stats, Jake is going to say, are they actually good or bad? And is this matchup this week good or bad for them for DFS? So let's clear the lineup screen here, Jake, and we'll go from earliest fight of the night to latest fight of the night. We have Eileen Perez, cover girl of the Daily Plug, by the way.
Yeah, she's good for DFS, but she's still not a good fighter. But man, this is a great matchup. She's going against Ashley Evans Smith, who's coming off like a 3-year layoff, had spine surgery, is like 1-4 in her last 5 fights, 36 years old. Like, all the red flags on Ashley Evans Smith, except for taking it on short notice. That's the only red flag she does not have, basically, or retiring afterwards. But maybe she is. Who knows? She's like podcasting now. I thought she was retired. I was shocked when she was put on this card. So I think it's just one of these matchup-specific spots. Great matchup. A high upside DFS fighter who's still not a good real life fighter in Eileen Perez.
1 foot, if not 2 feet out the door, it sounds like, for Evan Smith. And Jake, unless we want this video to go 48 minutes like last week, we may have to tidy up the good fighter, bad fighter, good matchup, bad matchup explanations. So let's keep it to good or bad, both sides, and then maybe one sentence of explanation. And again, for those of you watching, maybe we are wrong, and maybe you like the longer videos. Let us know in the comments whether you prefer shorter videos or longer videos. Just tell us below. Let's see how many comments we can get. Tell us what your ideal time for these types of videos are from us every single week. All right, moving on. We have your favorite fighter on the slate, Jake, Carl Deaton.
Yeah, he's terrible, and this is a bad matchup.
Easy enough. That's one way to speed up the video. And he is facing Alexander Munoz, who hasn't fought since 2021.
Yeah, I don't think he's good, but it's a good matchup.
All right, fair enough. All right, Jake, I like the speed here. All right, moving on. We have Genaro Valdez, 2 fights in the UFC. He's up against Evan Elder.
Yeah, he's a bad fighter in a bad matchup.
So what about Elder on the flip side, who also has 2 fights in the UFC?
Yeah, completely opposite. I think Elder is actually good despite being 0-2 in the UFC. He got robbed in his last fight, won the first 2 rounds on all of the scorecards, and then had his eye cut open. The fight was immediately stopped. Should be 1-1. And the loss was a short notice debut up a weight class. I think he's a good fighter and a great matchup.
Fair enough, yeah. Well, that's some good context, those stats here. Oftentimes, if you just look at the fight logs, you don't realize or you forget that the debut was up a weight class, and that is certainly not a great spot to be in. And we see the stats all the time of how fighters fare in those spots. So oftentimes you do have to throw those fights out of the window. All right, moving on, we have Melky Costa.
Yeah, I don't know about this guy yet, man. I don't think he's great, but I don't think he's terrible. I think he's sort of like a mediocre fighter in a good matchup.
All right, fair enough. Let's keep it moving. We have who we've talked about already, Estela Nunez, who has some of the worst takedown defense and cardio. So I guess it's going to be hard to call her a good fighter, but is she a bad fighter, and this is a bad matchup?
She's a bad fighter. She has really good striking. She has terrible grappling. She has terrible cardio. So it's like fighting a machete, basically. If you run into it, you're going to get cut, and otherwise, it's easy win. But I don't know about the matchup yet. I would say it's a bad matchup because Dudikova is a wrestler, but man, Dudikova seems kind of fragile and potentially could just get clipped one time and go out. We'll see. But I still got to say bad fighter, bad matchup.
How about this? Bad matchup for floor, great matchup for ceiling.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's going to be a limited window to land a knockout. So she's going to have to land it real quick before she gets taken down.
All right. Moving on, we have Tucker Lutz. The line is moving in his favor this week. It generally has been popular in DFS. 3 fights under his belt. He's up against Melsik Baghdasaryan.
Yeah, I think Tucker is just sort of kind of an average guy. I don't think he's good. He's not like terrible, but I think it's actually a decent matchup for him. Obviously, it's a dangerous matchup against a guy that could knock you out in under 60 seconds. But Melsik is very one-dimensional. He has no grappling. And Lutz has shown a willingness to grapple, even though he hasn't been great at landing takedowns. He tried to take Daniel Pineda down 4 times in his last fight. Pineda's a BJJ black belt. If you're going to try to take that guy down, you're definitely going to try to take Melsik down. So I think it's a good matchup, and Lutz is fighting for his job. I think he grinds out a decision here. So I think it's a good spot for him.
All right. And his opponent, Baghdasaryan, is he good? He's definitely good on the feet. Is he a good overall fighter? And this is a good matchup against Lutz.
Melsik is like the male version of Nunez, basically. I mean, they're basically like the same fighter. Both very aggressive strikers who are good for about a round or a round and a half, and then they gas out and they have no grappling. Honestly, those people are like doppelgangers of each other.
He's also the male version of Borshev, Slava.
Yeah, I mean although I think Slava has more cardio than either of those two. In fairness to him,
very true. That is very true.
But yeah, they're all. I mean, it's all the same style. It's these people that come from kickboxing and Muay Thai. That then they're just like, oh yeah, I'm an MMA fighter now, but they never really learn how to wrestle. So I mean, yeah, they're all cut from the same cloth. But they're all high upside when they can get their game going, and then they offer high upside for their opponents when they get taken down.
Yep. Nazim Sadikov against the most volatile matchup in the history of MMA DFS against Terrence McKinney.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Nazim, man. I thought he looked a little slow in the striking exchanges. He's well-rounded, and he trains, with Marab and Aljo and all those guys at Serra Longo. But I'm not really sold on this guy. I think he's sort of average. I think he's just a step behind in a lot of striking exchanges, which is a bad thing
Got
if
a
you're
perfect
fighting
matchup
Terrence
for you if you're behind
McKinney.
on striking.
Yeah, but it's a super weird matchup, right? Because he could get finished at any point in the first round, but if he can survive the first round, then he'll be in a great spot to land a late finish of his own. So it's a volatile matchup, and he's kind of a volatile fighter where I think he's hittable, but he's got power and he's got wrestling.
All right, we have Chelsea Chandler next against Norma Dumont. Chandler, we were high on in her debut. It's been a while since we've seen her, almost a full year. And not to pat ourselves on the back too hard, Jake, if I'm remembering correctly, she was low owned in her debut, right? And we were on her.
Oh yeah, she was like in the I want to say like low to mid 20% owned, and she was actually a slight underdog against Julia Stoliarenko, and then just dominated her and landed the round one TKO with ground and pound that we were expecting. Yeah, man, I think she's really good. That fight was at 140, which is something to consider. Stoliarenko normally fights at 135 and is actually fighting next week, or at least trying to fight at 125 against Molly McCann. I have no idea how she's ever going to make 125. Anyone that watches weigh-ins will remember Stoliarenko passed out on the scales trying to cut weight. So good luck seeing that fight actually happen. That's the co-main event in London. But we're getting sidetracked here. Anyways, yeah. So Chandler has fought at 135 and 145, but prefers to fight at 145. She's a big girl. I think she's good, man. I think she's gonna single-handedly try to keep the 145-pound division alive. So we'll see if it happens. It's a tough match against Demont. I mean, Demont wants to slow it down. She's well-rounded. I mean, she's very unlikable, but she's a good fighter. Yeah, it's been a little finny in the past. She got knocked out by Megan Anderson in her debut and got knocked down by Carol Hossa in her last fight. So that's encouraging for Chandler, I think. And there was like some beef after weigh-ins, like behind the scenes today. I don't know if that was they were just trying to drum that up
Yeah,
to try to keep the 145-pound division alive. That was sort of weird, but yeah, we'll see. I think it's an interesting fight.
All right, keeping the main card going, we have Albert Duraev, probably one of the worst fight IQs I've ever seen. Factoring that in, is he a good or bad fighter, and is this a good matchup against Park?
He's too dumb to be called a good fighter, and it's a tough matchup against Park. Like Duraev has the wrestling ability where he could be a good fighter, and he just refuses to use it most of the time, and he's very chinny. Yeah, man, the guy he's just so frustrating to bet on him doing the smart thing. So yeah, I'm gonna call him a bad fighter in a bad matchup.
All right, and finally, we have two more fighters here. We have Ottman Zaitar, who scored 111 and then 97, and then predictably scored 4 points as a popular dog. Will be another popular dog here, priced at 8K on DraftKings. Is he good or bad? And is this a good matchup? Might as well talk about both sides because Francisco Prado is in his second fight in the UFC opposing Zaitar.
Yeah, man, I think Zaitar is on full fraud alert, man. All of his wins have come against very low level opponents, even in the UFC, like Kama Worthy, and I forget that other guy's name that he like knocked out so bad the guy was like convulsing on the mat. That was pretty crazy, but it's really like he's been fighting terrible competition. He's 33 years old now. He's been really inactive. He got kind of briefly cut after breaking COVID protocol with that whole
Yeah.
what's in the bag potato gate thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't know, man. He got knocked out pretty bad by Frivola and did not look good in that fight. You kind of wonder, like, was this guy just like on the juice before? I don't know, man. I think he's just like a bully, and I feel like against decent competition, that's not going to work. And if you go back to his Brave fight, he kind of struggled with defensive grappling, which Prado can grapple, man. He's got as many or 6 submission wins and 5 knockout wins. And the guy, he's from Argentina, so obviously he loves Kimuras. I think it's a good matchup for Prado, who he's still so young. He just turned 21 that it's hard to say if he's a good fighter yet. He's got kind of a shorter reach and struggled to find his range against Jamie Malarkey. But I think he came in 11-0 with a 100% finishing rate. So I think he's at least a promising young fighter. And we'll see if he's good here. But I do think it's a good matchup. I think Zaitar is a bad fighter. And I guess it's a bad matchup considering Prado has never been finished before, and Zaitar is basically a round one or bust play.
All right, good stuff. I think we've covered basically every single fighter on the slate. So let's close out the show with a prize picks play, a fight that you have to target for DFS if you haven't deduced it already, and our stream parlay of the week. So, Jake, for those of you watching, you see the Prize Picks promo. If you haven't signed up for Prize Picks already, use promo code OCCUPIED to get a 100% deposit match bonus up to $100. Use it to parlay all kinds of props together, all different sports. Jake puts a ton of Prize Picks plays in his content on his site. Jake, which Prize Picks play stands out to you the most for Saturday?
Yeah, I really like the Eileen Perez over 71.5 points on Prize Picks, man. I think she's hitting that in a win, and she's currently a negative 225 favorite to win.
Easy enough. Fight that you have to target in DFS. The obvious answer is anytime Terrence McKinney is fighting. There's a couple fights like that on this card, but is there an under the radar one or maybe just another one that you want to highlight?
I feel like all three of the ones to target are super obvious. You know, it's anytime McKinney fights, you target his fights. Anytime a Zaitar fights, you target his fights. Anytime Valdez fights, you target his fights. And it's like after that, I'm more so picking sides in a lot of these. And even on some of those, I'm like picking sides to fade, you know, some of the more popular guys. It's tricky though, man. I think I'm just gonna, you know, point out those are the three obvious ones. If you want to get like under the radar stuff, I mean, a lot of them are more, I would say more like dogs you want to hedge with, like Dudikova and Nunez. Like Nunez, like you don't want to be crazy heavy on Nunez, but like yeah, I mean that's a fight you could target because if Nunez wins, she's going to be in the winning lineup.
True. Very good point. All right, and we'll finalize with our stream parlay of the week. Before we get to that, if you're still watching and you like the video, make sure you give us a thumbs up. As we say every week, don't want to sound like a broken record, but the thumbs up obviously helps us out in the YouTube algorithms, helps more people find these videos, but it also lets us know that you appreciate the content and that we should continue to do these videos every single week. So we'd appreciate that. It helps a lot of us out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. It's free to do. When you subscribe, you get notified whenever we go live, upload these UFC videos. Sometimes we have different timing every week. Just be subscribed to the channel here on YouTube, and you'll get notified whenever a video is posted or we're scheduled to go live. And any questions that you do have, you can always comment on the video. Remember earlier, we want to know your thoughts on the timing and the length of these videos, so drop that in the comments too. Discord is the best place to reach us, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. We're in there, I would say 24/7, and you can sweat out the fights with us there. So Jake, stream parlay of the week. I'll give a prop, you give a prop. I'm going to go with the Kazakh fighter whose nickname notably is Kazakh. Maxim by submission. I think plus 280 was the line we saw, and we saw how quickly Nam got subbed when it got to the mat last time in his fight. So Maxim by sub is an easy prop for me.
Yeah, man, what a thick nickname. I think that's solid, man. I think that fight they're giving a little bit too much equity to the knockout, which is possible, but I think that the submission's a little bit more likely. So I like the value on that side. I'm going to go a little bit on the safer side, just since you went a little bit longer. I'm going to go Elder, KO or decision at negative 175 on FanDuel. His money line is negative 300. He has one career submission win. I mean, obviously he's going to land a submission now, but I will say that I think that line should be, you know, like negative 250, maybe even closer to negative 300. I don't think that the submission equity is that high. So negative 175 on Elder, getting it down from negative 300, I think is solid. And if we parlay those together, it's plus 497. So pretty solid, man. Throw $20 on it, win 100.
Easy. We got $20 lying around. Go do that. And if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks already, get another $100. That's $120. Maybe this wins, you get another $100. The money's piling up. All right. That'll do it for this show. Make sure you check out Jake's work, MMADFS.com. He writes up every single fight, every single week from a betting and DFS perspective. If you want the in-depth information, go read that. Check out historical slates in his archive at MMADFS.com. And his Patreon, his premium content, has all sorts of betting, DFS, and projections, extras, everything you need to go crush a UFC slate. And OccupyFantasy.com is where you can find the daily plug, which I'll pull up really quickly, top plays, lineup construction tips, which is very important for tournaments, more best bets, Prize Picks plays, contests to target in DFS, and then our Occupy model ranks every fighter, FanDuel and DraftKings with projected ownership from Jake, of course, and our lineup builder allows you to build up to 300 UFC DFS lineups. So I think we got it all there. So Jake, follow him on Twitter at DFS_MMA. I am at Brian Jester FF, also at Occupy Fantasy. Thanks to you for listening, and good luck, as always, at UFC Vegas 77.